Hello YouTube, back for another video, this time another When You Pull. Please remember to like and subscribe for future content and help the channel grow. And without any further ado, let's get into it. So, this is When You Pull. With FR and Shinryu, things work a little differently than they have in the past, so I want to give my thoughts and go over things you might want to know before making your choices on these banners, whether pulling or otherwise. This is not a should you pull or similar, because I don't believe that it's the best format for what I'm aiming for. My goal is to try and use my experience to help people make more informed decisions for themselves, rather than simply parroting what they've read or seen online. Improving the discourse around fights and characters is always going to be good for the health of the game, and I often see folks say things like, I heard that X character is bad and falls off quickly, or that you have to pull for Y because they're meta and you can't beat content without them, which doesn't have any basis in fact, nor does it have any kind of personal opinion behind it that they're arguing for. And frankly, the game doesn't really function like that in Shinryu. I understand that a lot of people want to take the path of least resistance, and that not everyone wants to do a ton of research for fights and future viabilities of characters. And that's totally fine. But for those that are interested, I'm hoping to help people learn better habits when it comes to deciding whether or not to pull that are based more on fact or personal taste than on hearsay. With that being said, these are my thoughts, and as I want to encourage dialogue with the community, please leave a comment down below with what you think and what your plans are. So, first up, let's get Prompto out of the way. He's perfectly serviceable, but he gains literally nothing of note here outside of force levels. He could be useful to trigger characters' force conditions. He has so much stuff in his kit that it's crazy. But he'd probably be better off using someone else at this time. That being said, his EX has so many HP attacks that it is worth paying attention to, as that does have incredible scaling with force time. Next up, Mog. Mog actually gets a rework here. Everything he has now hits harder. Skill 1 is 3 HP attacks, with the base version of jump not eating up a skill use, so you're able to spam a lot more freely. Skill 2 is 2 HP attacks, but is AoE, and it swaps the skill 1 to continuous jump. Both of his follow-ups also get a power boost here, becoming double HP attacks. This isn't a lot, but remember that it's triggered literally every turn, so the skills are functionally 5 and 4 attacks apiece. Both of these scale pretty well, the follow-ups, as their AoE brave hits into a single target HP attack with splash. So they're more likely to cap on the main target and are going to deal better overall damage than a split HP attack would. Also, don't forget that these can remove debuffs or inflict confuse. This is honestly pretty solid, if not exactly outstanding. The LD attack becomes a 5-piece combo with refunds, which is pretty good damage. The AX is a triple HP attack that's full AoE, and the buffs grant Brave and HP damage up for the party. The C65 also gives party Brave Cap. Overall, I think Mog has a pretty solid kit that shouldn't be underestimated. It's by no means game-breaking or anything like that, but the tools that Mog has available are pretty handy. The HP regen is very, very weak, but the EX buff is BT level auras, though it does require your party members to be above 50% HP. Mog also has party brave regen and enemy speed down auras, which can definitely come in handy, while he is also, at least in my opinion, the best cleanse unit in the game, being in a position to cleanse debuffs with every turn that the little guy takes. He does, however, self-enchant for water damage while dealing water and thunder damage. Now, elemental damage dealers get hit pretty hard by elemental lockouts in the future, which basically reduce elemental brave damage that doesn't match, whatever type they want you to use. It'll reduce it just straight to 1. And this is especially bad for characters that have multiple elements in their kits. So, with that in mind, Mog not having Party Enchant is both a big win and a really fat L. Long story short, he's by no means the best character in the game, but if you happen to have his full kit or pull it, it might surprise you. He deals ranged, water, and thunder damage, while having HP regen, Brave regen, healing, debuff cleansing, party battery, free skills, and debuffs, including Confuse, which prevents action. So FR partners that might be notable include Kain, Kryl, Dash, Reno, Roha, Yuna, and Vaughn. Overall damage output isn't the best, but is a very consistent 4 to 7 HP attacks per turn. He's often been characterized as a Master of None unit, which is pretty fair. If his HP regen were better, or his auras were stronger, or he had an even slightly higher number of HP attacks per turn, he would be an incredibly strong unit. Unfortunately, none of those things are the case, so he's decent but not outstanding. That being said, I do look forward to seeing some really cool runs from all the Mog fans out there, because I think he's often sold a little short. Short joke, nailed it! And now, the moment you've really been waiting for. Kain, the OG, the Holy Dragoon, the first FR. So, to start with, I'm going to assume that you've heard that he's pretty good. That's true. As for why, well, he gets a rework, a BT, and an FR here. His rework makes his skills better, with his skill 1 hitting 4 times with Splash. Skill 2 now hits a whopping 7 times, turning it into an absolute machine gun of a damage skill. For comparison, Machina uses his burst to get 8 attacks per turn. The LD now hits harder, with the off-turn follow-up being a double HP attack, and the returning move being a triple. It may not sound like much on paper, but it really adds up really quickly. The EX gets a recast up, so you're going to be using it a lot more than, well, maybe not a lot more, but you'll be using it more, which is great as it's a triple HP attack with refunds, splash on 2 of the hits, and launch, and AoE delay, and it batteries your party to give you those fat launches. Really, really great button. The C65's more important effect is the Brave Cap Up, but is otherwise not really noteworthy. The BT, however, grants the party a huge 50% Brave Damage Cap Up, or excuse me, Brave Damage Up, not Cap Up, just 50% Brave Damage Up, along with Overflow and HP Damage Up, and an enormous 30% HP damage cap up. This is an incredible BT for a number of reasons, which start with the HP cap up and end somewhere around Kain's self-delay on W jump, helping the effect last longer. As for other FR characters that Kain can pair with, keep in mind that Kain does have a really good modified Brave command, which is the jump, which happens to have low turn rate. He does range damage, his base skills have high turn rate, his LD is instant, and his EX launches and batteries and delays. He's got plenty of characters he can work pretty well with, including FRs that can be triggered by off-turn damage. Examples include Kryl, Core, and Ferris. He would also probably be pretty good with Machina's FR, which wants the turn rate stuff. He's incredibly flexible and is incredibly strong, even now, 8 months later on JP. Phenomenal investment. Now, for Kain's FR. It starts by doing an AoE attack, then launches the enemy. This move has no action delay, so Kain will immediately take another turn as he triggers Force Time. His FR conditions are to launch an enemy, which increases the damage bonus by 5%, and to use a ranged attack or trigger one off turn, which also increments it by 5%. This FR can rack up some large numbers pretty quickly, provided that the enemies are taking a lot of turns, and you're getting a large number of off-turn ranged attacks. However, this is a lot harder to take advantage of than it sounds. As far as partners go, the first name that comes to mind is Laguna, whose BT debuff scales with Force Time, and who has nothing but range damage. Another option is Noctis, who can launch, does range damage, and can also do ranged follow-ups. However, I don't know if Kain's FR is able to trigger its bonus multiple times per turn. Some FRs can do that, but I haven't tested Kain's to see if he's able to. Regardless, your game plan using it is to set up Kain's BT effect, pop the FR, and then immediately have him jump away, preferably while carrying a useful call. The rest of your party, hopefully range damage dealers or launch units, takes the rest of the turns while Kain just rains down hellfire from above. You do not want to use Kain's FR and then go into burst phase with Kain. This loses out on his continuous turn-over-turn damage in mid-air. This FR isn't anything spectacular, but is better than not having any FR at all. That being said, as the very first FR, we can probably expect to see Kain become one of the first characters with FR boards, which haven't been introduced yet, so we may see an increase in the bonus that he gains from the conditions. Hopefully, the launch condition in particular is increased. Whatever the case, it's worth keeping in mind that this FR will almost definitely get better very suddenly with age. In the event that the FR boards do make you want to use Kain's Force Time, I would strongly recommend pulling the FR now rather than trying to get it later. It's entirely possible to do this Shinryu fight without an FR, but you are making the fight take a lot longer without one. Speaking of which, the fight! This fight isn't terribly difficult, but the enemies have some tricks up their sleeves that can kill a run pretty quickly. Throughout the fight, the enemies gain up to 80% Brave damage reduction, HP damage reduction, Brave gain reduction, 80% each, as well as Brave refund and Brave retain reductions. Anytime they attack a party member with less than 50% HP, they'll hit them with a 2-turn paralysis, which honestly can be pretty brutal. As their force gauge begins to increment and they hit their thresholds, they'll gain an HP poison aura that scales from 10 to 30% of your HP every turn, which adds up really quickly. Once that gauge fills, they'll do their force attack, which is a battery into an AoE HP attack that ignores HP damage reduction and is a guaranteed hit skill. Their force time lasts for 3 of their turns, so it's over pretty quickly, and it can be cancelled by using a ranged FR, meaning Kain. However, during their force time, any party member whose HP falls below 50% will be instantly killed. Think Lufenia Orb. Be wary of this, and do be sure to bring a character that's got good HP regen, and preferably some burst healing. I used a team of Kain, Lena, and Laguna here, and while it took me a few attempts to, get the hang of using force time and to, learn the fight mechanics, I had no issues cleaning house. And that was with a bunch of awful misplays, including using Kain's burst phase during force time. Don't do that. Lena was the MVP here, at least for me, as she has enough HP regen to counteract those poisons, along with burst heals and debuff immunity. The enemies do have 60 million HP, which is on the level of Divine Bahamut or Transcendence 9. And as I mentioned before, you can absolutely do this fight without an FR, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's better to, at least in my opinion, it's better to get in the habit of learning how to use force time effectively, including your setup turns. And the fight will last noticeably longer than it would if you had an FR on deck. Now, the fight lasting longer means that the enemy eye guys are going to be going into their force time more often, which means more HP poison and more chance of accidental instant kills or some kind of fatal misplay on your part. That can happen to anyone, and it's easier to minimize the opportunity for that to happen. Now remember, those force boards are coming, so that Kain FR is more like an investment in the future, should you choose to make it. And if not, I would strongly suggest taking a Kain FR friend. And that's it. Those are my thoughts on the upcoming units. Drop a comment and let me know what you think of the format, and if you're pulling here, and if you're not too. Like and subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.